Have you ever walked into a place where you should have been respected, only to be treated like you don't belong? Imagine standing at a bank counter, papers in hand, only to be mocked, dismissed, even slapped across the face, not because of what you lacked, but because of who they assumed you were. Now, picture the twist. What if the person they insulted, belittled, and humiliated turned out to be the very CEO who owned the bank? In that instant, the room froze. The workers who thought they held power suddenly found themselves facing a truth they could not run from. A choice had to be made: continue defending injustice or confront their own prejudice head on. And here's the real question: what would you have done if it were you standing there, exposed to scorn in front of strangers? Would you have stayed silent, or would you have spoken your truth? This is not just a story about one woman. It is about dignity, about justice, about the cost of silence and the courage it takes to stand. Stay with us as we walk into that lobby, relive the moment, and discover what happened next. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because this is a story you'll never forget. The sound came first, a sharp crack echoing across polished marble. Every head in the lobby turned. A bank teller, a young woman in a pressed navy vest, had just slapped a black customer across the face. For a moment, the air froze, even the clicking of heels, the shuffling of papers, the hum of the printers, it all seemed to stop. The room was silent, except for the quick intake of breath from the crowd. The woman who'd been struck did not stumble. She did not raise her voice. She simply lifted her chin, steady, her dark eyes holding the teller's in a gaze that was at once calm and cutting. Her name was Celeste Morgan, but no one in that branch knew it. Not yet. It was a Friday morning at Havencrest Bank's Midtown branch. Sunlight streamed through tall glass windows, cutting across the marble floor in clean geometric lines. Customers lined up for routine deposits, withdrawals, and check cashing. Celeste, dressed in jeans and a faded gray hoodie, looked like just another woman waiting her turn. A simple backpack hung from her shoulder. Her hair, pulled back under a plain cap, revealed nothing of who she really was. When the teller Brittany Harper first saw her, she frowned. Next, she called, her voice already clipped, already suspicious. Celeste stepped forward, sliding a driver's license and a bank card across the counter. "I need to process a business payroll. Time sensitive." Brittany glanced at the ID, then at Celeste. Her lip curled ever so slightly. Payroll for what business? Celeste's voice was even. For Morgan Equity Group. The teller laughed under her breath. "I don't think so. Where'd you get this card?" She didn't wait for an answer. She pushed the license back across the counter with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. "You need to take this somewhere else." Celeste didn't move. Her hand rested lightly on the counter, steady as stone. "I have authorization. Please check the system." Something in the calmness seemed to irritate Brittany. She leaned forward, lowering her voice, though half the lobby could hear. "Lady, I know scams when I see them. Don't waste my time." Celeste inhaled slowly. The lessons of her mother came back to her. Strength is not loud. Strength is steady. "I'm asking you to look again." The teller's face flushed red, and then, in a burst of anger she could not control, her hand shot out. The slap cracked like a whip across Celeste's cheek. Gasps rippled through the room. A young man near the back, his phone already in hand, tapped record without thinking. The live stream went live to a few dozen followers. Within minutes, it would be thousands. Celeste did not move, her eyes locked on Brittany's, still calm, still composed. Her voice, when it came, was soft. "You've made a mistake." No shouting, no threats, just quiet strength, the kind that unsettles more than anger ever could around her. Murmurs rose. Did she just hit her? That's assault. What's wrong with this place? A mother pulled her child closer, shaking her head. An older man muttered, "Unbelievable. In this day and age?" But the teller straightened. Unrepentant. She was trying to commit fraud. Brittany insisted. She deserved it. The guard at the far wall shifted uncomfortably. His name was Harold Denton. He had been with the bank for 15 years, and he had seen things like this before. Too many times. He wanted to step forward, but protocol said to wait for a manager. So he stayed still, jaw clenched, watching Celeste closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her employees, 932 of them, waiting for payroll, waiting for her to make sure their families were secure this weekend. She thought of her father, who had stood in lines like this 30 years ago, treated as invisible. She thought of her mother's voice. They will try to strip your dignity. Never give them the satisfaction. When she opened her eyes again, the fire inside was quiet, but unmistakable. She spoke clearly enough for the whole lobby to hear. "Check the system. Now." But Brittany crossed her arms. Her smirk returned. "I don't have to check anything. You don't belong here. Get out before I call my manager." The crowd shifted uneasily. Some pulled out phones, some whispered. The young man, live streaming, whispered into his mic. "She's not backing down. She's so calm. Wow." Viewers typed comments. "Who is she? That teller's gonna regret this." "Keep recording." At that exact moment, a chime echoed overhead. "Attention system update in 30 minutes." Celeste glanced at the digital clock. Every minute mattered. Every delay put hundreds of paychecks at risk. She knew she could walk out. She knew she could reveal herself. End this instantly. But part of her, a deep, steady part, wanted to see just how far the bias would go. Because this wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever been treated as less than, simply for walking into a bank while black. Her cheek still burned from the slap, but her spirit did not flinch. "I'm not leaving," she said softly. "Do your job." The teller glared, and with a sharp gesture, she waved toward the office door. "Manager," she shouted. "We've got a problem here." The crowd stirred. The tension thickened, and Celeste stood in the middle of it all, still, calm, waiting, not as a victim, but as a test. A test the bank was about to fail. The lobby door to the side office opened, and a tall man in a navy suit walked out with the brisk steps of someone convinced he owned every square foot of the building. His name was Marcus Reed, the branch manager. The air shifted as employees straightened. Customers recognized him as the man who gave orders around here. Marcus's eyes swept the lobby until they landed on Celeste. His gaze held not curiosity but suspicion, the kind reserved for someone already judged guilty. What seems to be the problem? His tone was cool, almost bored. Brittany, flushed with adrenaline from the slap, pointed directly at Celeste. She tried to pass off false credentials. Brittany said quickly, "Payroll documents, but it's obviously fake." Marcus folded his arms, tilting his head as if the case was already closed. He didn't bother to examine the ID still resting on the counter. Instead, He addressed Celeste with a condescending half-smile. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We can't process this kind of request." Celeste's expression didn't change. Her hands remained folded loosely in front of her. Voice measured. "I'm not leaving. This request is legitimate. I am asking you to check the system." Her words weren't loud, yet they seemed to echo. Something about her tone made a few customers lean in, sensing there was more here than appearances suggested. Marcus chuckled as though to entertain the crowd. "Look around you. Does anyone here believe you manage a payroll in the millions? Let's be reasonable. The laughter he expected never came. Instead, murmurs spread, small voices questioning, doubting him rather than her. From the side, the supervisor, Elaine Porter, emerged from the office. Elaine had the weary look of a mid-level employee who had spent years enforcing policies without ever questioning their fairness. She adjusted her blazer and spoke briskly. "Marcus, is this the one causing disruption?" Brittany jumped in again. "Yes, she refuses to leave." Elaine's lips tightened. She addressed Celeste as if speaking to a child refusing bedtime. "This is private property. If you don't exit now, we'll have no choice but to involve law enforcement." In the far corner, Harold, the security guard, shifted once more. He had known Celeste only as another face in the crowd, but the way she carried herself, the steady composure even after being struck, reminded him of people he'd once served with in the military. Leaders who didn't need to raise their voices to command respect. He found himself silently rooting for her. Though protocol bound his hands, Celeste inhaled slowly, her chest rising and falling like a tide. She glanced at the digital clock again. 23 minutes until system maintenance would cut off the payroll window. Every second mattered. 932 employees and their families were depending on her. She thought briefly of those families. A single mother in Houston counting on her check for rent. A technician in Phoenix saving for his daughter's college tuition. A janitor in Charlotte planning to buy groceries tonight. Every face flickered in her mind like photographs hung in a hallway. She could not fail them. Marcus snapped his fingers toward the guard. "Harold, escort her out." Harold hesitated. "Sir, she hasn't raised her voice, hasn't made a scene. She's trespassing," Marcus insisted. "Do your job." Celeste turned slightly, meeting Harold's eyes. There was no plea in her look, only quiet acknowledgement, as though she understood his dilemma. She spoke clearly for the room to hear. "I came to make a legitimate transaction. If you deny me service, that will be noted." The crowd stirred. An older woman with a cane, her silver hair neatly pinned back, pushed herself to her feet. Her name was Mrs. Whitaker. She'd been a customer of this branch for 40 years. Her voice quivered with age but carried remarkable weight. "I saw what happened. That young woman slapped her. Now you want her thrown out? This is wrong." Marcus's jaw clenched. He was not used to open defiance from customers. "Mrs. Whitaker, please, sit down. This doesn't concern you. It concerns everyone," she shot back, surprising even herself with the force in her voice. "What you are doing is discrimination, plain and simple." The lobby buzzed, phones tilted upward, recording, comments streamed onto Tyler's live stream. "This is getting real. That old lady's brave. This bank's done for." Celeste kept her voice level. "I will not leave. The payroll must be processed." Marcus signaled toward another office door. From it emerged Derek Shaw, the operations manager. He was taller than Marcus, broader too, and his tone carried the arrogance of someone who believed he was the final authority. "What's happening here?" Derek demanded. Marcus gestured. "Attempted fraud. She's stalling. We need her out." Derek studied Celeste for a long moment. His eyes narrowed. "Lady, you're wasting everyone's time. People like you don't walk in with multi-million-dollar transactions. Take your little show elsewhere." The phrase "people like you" hung in the air like a poison cloud. Customers exchanged glances. "Mrs. Whitaker gasped. Harold's fist clenched at his side. Celeste felt the sting of those words, sharper than the slap, but her face betrayed nothing. Her silence stretched until even Derek shifted uncomfortably. Then she spoke, steady as before. "Every second you waste brings harm to hundreds of families who depend on this payroll. I am not leaving." Her tone had the cadence of truth, undeniable and unshakable. A customer whispered. "She sounds like a leader." Marcus scoffed, turning to Derek. "Call the police. Let them drag her out." But before Derek could respond, Celeste lifted her chin and said something that made the entire room lean forward. "Before you do that," she said softly, "call Olivia Chambers." The name dropped like a stone in still water. Olivia Chambers was the regional president, a woman whose authority stretched over dozens of branches. Employees exchanged uneasy looks. Marcus frowned. "Why would we call her for this nonsense?" Celeste's gaze didn't waver. "Tell her Celeste Morgan is standing in your lobby." The room fell into absolute silence. Brittany blinked, her smirk evaporating. Elaine's mouth fell open. Even Derek looked suddenly uncertain. "Mrs. Whitaker clutched her cane with both hands, whispering. Celeste Morgan Tyler's phone buzzed with comments exploding across the live stream. "Wait, Celeste Morgan, the CEO. This is insane. No way this is happening live." Harold, still by the wall, felt his heartbeat quicken. He knew that name. Everyone in banking did. Celeste stood there, unflinching, her disguise peeling away not through clothing or appearance but through the sheer gravity of her presence. She did not need to raise her voice. The weight of her words did the work. And the employees of Havencrest Bank's Midtown branch suddenly realized they had been standing not before a customer to be dismissed, but before the woman who owned everything around them. The name still hung in the air like thunder that hadn't finished rolling. Celeste Morgan. The customers looked around, whispering to one another, trying to piece together what that meant. Employees exchanged nervous glances. The teller who had slapped her just minutes earlier shrank behind the counter, her earlier confidence collapsing. Marcus Reed tried to regain control, clearing his throat. "Anyone can claim to be someone important," he said, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. "We can't just—" But Elaine Porter cut him off, lowering her voice. "Marcus, if she really is Celeste Morgan, we're standing in front of the CEO. This could ruin us." Derek Shaw bristled. "Don't be ridiculous. She's dressed like a street customer. This is a bluff." Yet, even as he spoke, his eyes flickered with unease. Celeste hadn't moved. She simply stood, her presence calm but unyielding, like a stone in a river. Her silence was more powerful than their denials. She didn't need to prove herself in that moment. The weight of her quiet confidence was already proven everything. "Call her," Celeste finally said. "Call Olivia Chambers. You'll find out soon enough." The tension pressed down on the room. The customers leaned forward as if watching a courtroom drama. Phones continued recording, the live stream ballooning with viewers. Tyler Brooks whispered into his mic. "They're freaking out. They don't know what to do. This is insane. Mrs." Whitaker stood tall despite her cane, her voice steady. "You heard the lady. Call her superior. Let the truth speak." Marcus scowled at the old woman, but his authority had already cracked. He gestured impatiently toward Elaine. "Fine. Call Olivia. Put this nonsense to rest." Elaine fumbled for the phone, her fingers trembling. As it rang, every eye in the lobby fixed on her. When the line clicked, a sharp voice came through. "This is Chambers." Elaine swallowed hard. "Ms. Chambers, this is Elaine Porter from Midtown Branch. There's a situation. A woman here claims to be Celeste Morgan." The silence on the other end was immediate and telling. Then came a rapid, clipped demand. "Put her on the line. Now." Elaine's face drained of color. She slowly extended the phone toward Celeste, who took it with the same composure she had maintained all morning. "Olivia," Celeste said softly. "I trust you're well. Celeste." The voice shifted from sharp authority to a near stammer. "You're at Midtown." What on earth happened? Celeste's eyes swept the room, meeting the stares of the employees who had dismissed her. Exactly what I feared. Bias unchecked, but I wanted to see it myself. Gasps rose among the customers. Marcus took a step back. Derek's jaw slackened, and Brittany Harper looked like she might faint. The live-stream chat exploded. "She is the CEO. That teller slapped her OMG. This is gonna blow up everywhere." Celeste handed the phone back to Elaine. Her voice carried enough for everyone to hear. "Tell Ms. Chambers. I'll speak to her in person later. For now, I have payroll to process." The phrase payroll seemed to break the trance. Marcus scrambled, words tumbling. "Ms. Morgan, we didn't realize." Celeste cut him off with a simple raise of her hand. She didn't need to yell. The gesture alone silenced him. "Enough," she said. Her tone was even, but the weight behind it was undeniable. What I needed was not recognition. What I needed was simple respect. That was denied. The word struck harder than anger ever could. Customers murmured in agreement. Some nodded. Others clapped softly. Mrs. Whitaker shook her head. "I've banked here my whole life. Never seen anything like this." Harold Denton finally stepped forward, unable to remain silent any longer. "Ma'am," he said to Celeste, his voice deep and steady, "I saw what happened from the start. You handled it with more patience than anyone could have. For what it's worth, you have my respect." Celeste met his eyes, gratitude flickering for just a moment. "Thank you, Harold." Derek Shaw tried once more, though his voice was now stripped of arrogance. If we'd only known Celeste turned toward him. Her gaze was piercing yet calm. "That's the point. You didn't know, and because you didn't, you assumed the worst. You treated me as less, and you've done the same to countless others who never had the chance to defend themselves." The truth in her words rang through the lobby like a bell. No one could deny it, not even the employees who stood frozen. Their power unraveled in minutes. The digital clock above the counters blinked. 17 minutes left before the system update would lock her out of payroll. Time was still running. Yet Celeste refused to rush. She understood that moments like this were bigger than deadlines. This was about exposing a deeper rot, one that no software update could repair. She stepped closer to the counter where Brittany stood, trembling now. Celeste's voice was low but clear. "You struck me, not because of fraud, not because of evidence, but because of what you saw when you looked at me. That tells me everything I need to know about the culture here." Brittany's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Celeste turned back to the lobby, her voice rising just enough for all to hear. "This is not only about me. It is about everyone who has walked into this branch and been treated as though their presence was suspect. It is about every customer judged by their skin before their credentials." The customers erupted in agreement. Some clapped. Others shouted, "That's right." Mrs. Whitaker dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. For the first time that morning, Marcus Reed looked small. His authority, once unquestioned, crumbled under the weight of truth spoken plainly. Celeste stepped back, her expression softening. "We will move forward," she said. "But first, accountability." The words promised something bigger than the moment, something that would not stop at one branch. The customers could feel it. The employees could feel it. Even the live stream viewers thousands of miles away could feel it. The tide had turned. The digital clock above the teller stations glowed with merciless precision. 16 minutes. The reminder pulsed across the screens at every desk system maintenance payroll window closing. For most customers in the lobby, those numbers meant little. But for Celeste Morgan, they represented 932 employees spread across the country, waiting for paychecks that kept their homes warm, their pantries full, their children in school. She stood still, though every part of her body was aware of the ticking seconds. Her composure never cracked, but inside, a quiet current of urgency coursed through her. She knew she couldn't let the humiliation distract her from the mission. This wasn't about pride. This was about responsibility. Marcus Reed shuffled beside her, tugging at his tie, as if adjusting the fabric could restore his fading authority. "Ms. Morgan," he said carefully now, his arrogance replaced with a brittle politeness. "If you'll allow us, we can process your request immediately." But Celeste wasn't satisfied with empty courtesies. She looked at Marcus, then at Elaine and Derek. "You had the opportunity to do your jobs before you knew my name. You failed. Processing a transaction now doesn't erase what has already happened." The room hummed with agreement. Customers shifted, nodding, whispering. Some began to applaud quietly, as though Celeste's words carried the gavel of justice itself. She walked to the counter, setting her ID and documentation down once more. Her movements were deliberate, measured. "Run the payroll," she said. "Every second matters." Brittany Harper reached for the documents with trembling hands. Her earlier bravado drained away. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant. Derek leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Just get it done. We can deal with the rest later." The hum of the computer filled the air as Brittany typed. Celeste's eyes stayed on the screen, watching every keystroke. 12 minutes. In the corner, Tyler Brooks whispered into his phone, narrating to the swelling audience on his live stream. "She's incredible, calm, steady. It's like watching someone play chess while everyone else is panicking." Comments scrolled in. "She's teaching them a lesson. This is history in real time. I can't stop watching." Mrs. Whitaker edged closer, leaning on her cane. "Don't let them stall you." "Dear," she said softly, "I've seen too many people pushed aside here." Celeste gave the older woman a small nod, her eyes warm for a brief second. "Thank you. Your voice matters more than you know." Suddenly, the computer beeped. Brittany frowned at the screen. System flag. Says account authorization failed. Derek straightened, eager for any lifeline. There. You see, must be an error. Maybe she doesn't have the authority after all. But Celeste didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm. The failure isn't in the account. It's in the way you entered the credentials. Check again, slowly. Brittany's cheeks reddened. Her fingers shook as she retyped. The error message vanished. Access granted. The account number glowed on screen, followed by the payroll amount, $2,432.17. Gasps rippled through the room. For a moment, everyone seemed frozen by the number alone. Marcus's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Elaine whispered, "Good Lord." Celeste remained steady. Proceed with disbursement. The clock now showed 9 minutes. Brittany hit enter, her eyes darting nervously. Processing bar, 40%, 60, 90, complete. A printer near the counter whirred to life, spitting out confirmation slips. Celeste picked one up, scanned it, and slipped it into her folder. Her employees would be paid on time. Relief brushed through her chest like a breeze, but she let no one see it. Instead, she turned back to the managers, her tone sharpening. The transaction is complete, but this morning has revealed more than numbers. It has revealed a sickness. Her words hung heavy. You looked at me and saw someone undeserving. You dismissed me without evidence. You struck me without cause. And if I had not spoken my name, you would have thrown me out. Her voice deepened, each word cutting into the silence. Tell me how many others have you treated the same way? Without a chance to defend themselves, Elaine lowered her gaze, cheeks flushed with shame. Marcus tugged at his cufflinks, unable to answer. Derek clenched his jaw, the arrogance drained but pride still resisting. Harold Denton, the guard, stepped forward at last. She's right, he said quietly, but firmly enough to carry through the lobby. I've watched it happen. Maybe not a slap, but the looks, the assumptions. People judged before they even reached the counter. The customers stirred, murmurs turning to open agreement. Mrs. Whitaker's cane tapped against the floor as she declared, "It's been this way too long. Today, it changes." The weight of collective witness pressed down harder than any reprimand. The employees stood exposed, their behavior broadcast not just in that lobby but across thousands of screens through Tyler's live stream. Celeste's gaze softened for a moment, not in pity, but in resolve. This isn't only about punishment, she said. It's about truth, and truth demands accountability. The clock blinked 5 minutes to maintenance, but the countdown no longer carried fear. Her duty to her employees was fulfilled. Now came the greater duty to confront the rot within the institution she led. She stepped back, folding her hands once more, calm as ever. "This is not over," she said. "It begins here." Customers clapped louder now, some cheering openly. Tyler's voice shook with excitement as he spoke into his mic. "You guys, this is unreal. She got the payroll through, and now she's calling them out. This isn't just a bank story. This is bigger." Celeste looked toward the exit briefly, sunlight spilling across the marble floor. For an instant she longed for quiet, for escape from the spectacle, but her heart reminded her leadership doesn't hide from the fire, it steps into it. She straightened her shoulders. The next steps would change everything, not just for Midtown Branch, but for every branch that bore her name. The confirmation slip still rested in Celeste's folder, the evidence that the payroll had gone through. The urgency of the clock no longer pressed on her shoulders. but something heavier lingered the weight of what had been revealed in this lobby. She could have walked out then, quiet, with her employees cared for and her dignity intact. Yet leaving would have meant abandoning the truth that had just cracked open in front of them all. The crowd murmured, waiting. Marcus Reed kept glancing at the exit like a man hoping the earth might open and swallow him whole. Elaine Porter fiddled with her bracelet. Derek Shaw shifted on his feet, jaw tight with silent rage, and Brittany Harper's hands still trembled at the keyboard, her cheek pale. Celeste lifted her chin, her voice steady, and for the first time she chose to name herself aloud. "My name is Celeste Morgan," she said. The room erupted in gasps. Phones tilted higher. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, it's really her." Celeste let the silence after her words expand, heavy and deliberate. "I am not just a customer. I am not a stranger trying to trick you. I am the chief executive officer of Haven Crest Bank. I am the majority shareholder. This branch," she paused, sweeping her gaze across every trembling employee, "belongs to me." It was as though the floor itself had shifted beneath them. Marcus's face drained of all color, the realization hitting him like a tidal wave. Elaine's lips parted, but no sound came. Derek took a step back, his bravado shrinking. Brittany covered her mouth with her hands, eyes wide, whispering, "No, no, it can't be." But the live stream had already confirmed it. Tyler Brooks' voice shook with awe. "Guys, she said it. She owns the bank. This whole place is hers." Comments poured across the screen faster than he could read. "She's a legend. This teller's career is over. History being made right now." Mrs. Whitaker leaned against her cane, her eyes glistening with vindication. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew there was something about her." Celeste didn't smile. She didn't revel in their shock. Her expression remained composed, her tone even, as if she were reciting a fact from a ledger. "You didn't see me. You saw what you expected to see. A black woman in a hoodie, a stranger in your lobby. And you decided that meant fraud. That meant threat. That meant less than you." She took a step closer to the counter, her voice never rising, yet somehow growing louder in its gravity. "But you were wrong. And today the entire country will see how wrong you were." The lobby buzzed with a new kind of electricity. This was no longer just an ugly scene of bias. This was a reckoning. Marcus finally found his voice, though it cracked. "Ms. Morgan." If we had known, Celeste stopped him with a raised hand. "Stop. That sentence is exactly the problem. If we had known, respect should not depend on knowledge of who someone is. Dignity is not conditional." Her words landed like hammer blows. A man in line clapped once. Then others joined until the lobby echoed with applause. Celeste let it wash over her but kept her eyes fixed on the managers. She pointed gently toward Brittany. "You, the teller who struck me, you saw me as a fraud. You laid your hand on me. That act alone is grounds for immediate dismissal." Brittany's knees seemed to weaken. She opened her mouth, searching for a defense, but nothing came. Tears brimmed in her eyes. Celeste turned to Marcus. "You, the branch manager, called for my removal without even glancing at the credentials in front of you. You mocked the idea that someone like me could manage payroll in the millions. You failed the very first test of leadership fairness." Marcus's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of decades of unchallenged power was suddenly crashing down. Her gaze shifted to Elaine. "You supervisor, threatened to call the police on a customer who had done nothing more than stand her ground. How many others have you threatened the same way? Elaine's lips trembled. She looked down at the floor and then to Derek. And you said people like you don't walk in with multi-million-dollar transactions. Do you understand what you said? Do you understand how many years of prejudice and exclusion those words carry? You revealed more in that sentence than you know. Derek clenched his fists, his pride refusing to collapse, but he had no defense. Celeste let the silence settle once more. Then she said, "Accountability will follow. Today, not later, not hidden behind closed doors. Today, in front of those who witnessed it." The crowd stirred, leaning forward, hungry for justice. The phone in Elaine's hand buzzed again. Olivia Chambers, the regional president, calling back. Elaine looked as if she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Celeste took the phone with measured calm. "Olivia," she said evenly. "Celeste, my God. The news is already spreading. What do you want me to do?" Celeste's eyes swept the lobby. She thought of her employees across the nation, of every customer who had walked into a bank branch and felt invisible. She thought of her mother's words, "Never let anger speak louder than truth." "Send an HR team here today," Celeste said. "Full authority. We begin disciplinary action immediately. No delays, no cover-ups." "Yes, ma'am," Olivia said quickly. "Consider it done." Celeste handed the phone back, her face calm, her words carrying the weight of inevitability. "The world is watching," she said, "and so am I." The applause rose again, louder this time. Tyler's livestream viewers surged into the hundreds of thousands. Comments scrolled like wildfire. "This is justice. She's rewriting the rules right in front of us. Dignity matters." Celeste felt the burn of the slap still faintly on her cheek, but it no longer mattered. That pain had been transformed into something greater, a symbol, a story, a moment that would echo far beyond the marble walls of Midtown Branch. She stood tall in the center of the lobby, the weight of centuries behind her, the eyes of a nation upon her, and the resolve of a leader who knew that this was only the beginning. The lobby had grown quiet again, the crowd holding their breath as though the building itself knew a secret was about to be unveiled. Celeste stood with her hands resting lightly on the marble counter, her presence calm yet undeniable. The sting on her cheek was almost gone, replaced by something sharper, a steady fire of conviction. "I did not walk into this branch by accident," Celeste said, her tone low but resonant. Today was never about a simple payroll transfer. Today was about seeing the truth with my own eyes. Confusion rippled through the staff. Marcus frowned, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Celeste reached into her satchel once more and pulled out a slim black folder. She laid it open on the counter. Pages neat, tabbed in color. On the front page, in crisp, bold letters, were the words, "Haven Crest Bank Internal Audit Program. Confidential." Gasps echoed. Customers leaned closer, phones lifting higher. Tyler Brooks' livestream comments exploded. "Audit. This is undercover boss in real life. They just played themselves." Celeste let the room absorb it before she continued. "Every quarter, I select a branch to evaluate firsthand. I walk in as a customer. I test the systems. I measure not only accuracy, but humanity. Because banking isn't just about numbers, it's about how you treat the people standing in front of you." Elaine's hand went to her chest, as if trying to slow the hammering inside. Derek muttered a curse under his breath. Brittany stared at the floor, cheeks wet. "This was your turn," Celeste said simply. "Midtown Branch. And you have shown me everything I needed to see." The weight of her words pressed down like a storm cloud. No one moved. No one dared. She opened another page in the folder. I had compliance data already, mystery shopper reports, employee surveys, but none of that reveals what a person feels when she walks through your doors. None of it shows the look in a teller's eyes when they decide who belongs and who doesn't. She paused, scanning the room. What I experienced here today tells me more than any report ever could. Mrs. Whitaker, leaning on her cane, nodded slowly. "Bless you for telling it plain, child," she said, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "Bless you." Celeste inclined her head gently, then turned her attention back to the employees. "This incident is no longer isolated. It is evidence, and evidence has consequences." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, then turned it face out to the crowd. A news alert glowed. "Breaking CEO of Haven Crest confronts discrimination at Atlanta branch livestream goes viral." The timing was merciless. The story had already leapt beyond these walls. Celeste tapped the screen dark and slid it away. Every person watching deserves more than outrage. They deserve change. Real change. She gestured to Kevin, who had been silent near the back, caught between shame and duty. "Mr. Shaw, you will prepare compliance documentation for the federal regulators. They will need to see this." Kevin blinked, startled. Yes, ma'am." Her gaze swept back to Marcus. "And you will explain, in writing, why this branch has failed to complete required bias training for nearly 2 years. Federal law mandates annual certification." Marcus swallowed hard. I'll provide the report. You will provide accountability." Celeste corrected softly, the steel in her tone unmistakable. Tyler whispered into his phone, "She's dismantling them piece by piece. Live. No filter. This is historic." Celeste looked once more at the customers who had gathered, at the strangers who had become witnesses. "I want you all to remember this moment," she said. "Not because I'm the CEO, not because of the money in my accounts, but because this is what happens when assumptions go unchallenged. This is what it feels like when bias is allowed to run unchecked." A college student filming near the doorway called out, "So, what happens now?" Celeste turned her eyes toward him, her voice measured but carrying conviction. "Now we rebuild, but we do it differently." She picked up her pen, signed the audit folder, and laid it back on the counter. "Effective immediately. This branch is under review. Staff will face consequences proportional to their actions. Some will be removed. Some will be retrained. Systems will change. Policies will tighten. And the people who walk through these doors tomorrow will not face what I faced today." Brittany sobbed quietly, whispering apologies that seemed to vanish in the echoing lobby. Elaine stood stiff, her hands clenched. Derek looked ready to lash out, but the eyes of dozens of recording phones kept him frozen. Marcus stared at the floor, ashamed but silent. Celeste felt the tension but did not waver. She knew the hardest part was still ahead. It wasn't enough to expose. She had to transform. Her words slowed, almost tender now. "I came here prepared to be underestimated. I came here expecting obstacles. But even I did not expect the violence of a slap across the face in my own bank. That wound will fade. What must not fade is the lesson. The lobby was silent again, hanging on her every syllable. Celeste gathered her folder, placed it neatly back in her satchel, and said, "Today isn't the end. It's the beginning of a reckoning." The live stream ticked past 1 million viewers. Tyler's voice cracked as he whispered, "Y'all, we are watching history unfold." The echo of Celeste's words still lingered in the marble lobby. Customers stood motionless, phones raised high, their expressions torn between awe and disbelief. The employees at the counter looked as if the air had been drained from the room. No one dared to move, no one dared to speak first. The entire building seemed suspended, waiting for Celeste Morgan's next breath. She adjusted her satchel on her shoulder and stepped closer to the counter, her voice calm, deliberate. "We will not wait for committees. We will not bury this in paperwork. Accountability begins here. Today." Her words cut through the tension like a blade. Brittany Harper's sobs grew louder. She pressed her palms against her face, whispering. I didn't mean Celeste's gaze softened, but only slightly. Intention does not erase harm. You struck me, a customer, without cause. You violated the most basic principle of this institution, respect. For that, you are terminated effective immediately. The words fell heavy. Brittany swayed on her feet, tears sliding down her cheeks. A security guard, Damon Wright, approached quietly, not with force but with solemn duty. He guided Brittany gently toward the back office. She went without resistance, her shoulders trembling. The crowd murmured, phones capturing every second. One viewer's comment flashed across Tyler Brooks' screen. "She just fired her on the spot." That's leadership. Celeste turned her attention to Marcus Reed. The branch manager straightened, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. "Marcus," she said evenly, "you had every opportunity to de-escalate. Instead, you mocked me. You called for my removal. You failed your staff and your customers. For that, you are suspended without pay pending a full HR investigation." Marcus's jaw clenched, his pride fighting to keep him upright, but the verdict had landed. He nodded once, stiffly, unable to look her in the eye. Elaine Porter shifted uneasily. Celeste's eyes found hers next. "Elaine, you threatened to weaponize the police against a customer doing nothing more than standing in line. That choice carries danger far beyond this lobby. How many times has fear been your first reflex?" Elaine stammered. I thought you thought wrong," Celeste said firmly. "You will be reassigned to mandatory retraining and probation. You will learn what leadership requires before you're trusted again." Elaine's face flushed crimson, but she said nothing. Then Celeste turned to Derek Shaw. His jaw was set, eyes defiant, fists still tight at his sides. "And you," she said, "you revealed what too many believe but never dare to say aloud. You told me people like you don't bring millions into this bank. That sentence alone reveals the sickness we must confront. You are relieved of duty effective immediately. HR will process your termination." Derek's face twisted with rage. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" "I can," Celeste interrupted, her tone like stone. "And I will, because leadership without accountability is nothing more than power unchecked." Security guard Damon reappeared, standing silently behind Derek. For a moment, Derek looked as if he might resist, but the sight of dozens of cameras and the calm authority in Celeste's eyes left him no room. He turned away, muttering curses under his breath, and walked toward the back office. The crowd exhaled as though they had been holding their breath for hours. Tyler's live stream comments scrolled faster than his eyes could follow. This is history. Real justice in real time. She's rewriting how leaders respond. Celeste stood still in the center of the storm, her expression steady. She was not triumphant. She was resolute. She looked toward Kevin Shaw, the operations manager who had been silent, watching, torn between loyalty and shame. "Kevin," she said gently, "you remained quiet. Silence is not neutral. Silence allows harm to grow, but you also did not escalate. For that reason, you will not be dismissed. Instead, you will lead the compliance retraining for this branch. You will face your complicity by building something better." Kevin's throat bobbed. He nodded slowly, gratitude and fear mingling in his eyes. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered. Celeste turned her attention back to the room, her gaze sweeping over customers and staff alike. What happened here today is not a scandal to be managed. It is a turning point. We do not hide the truth, we confront it, and we change. Applause broke out again, stronger this time. Mrs. Whitaker, leaning heavily on her cane, clapped until her hands shook. "About time," she said loudly. "About time somebody told the truth." Celeste allowed herself the smallest smile, but her voice remained steady. "This bank will not be a place where dignity is optional. Not while I lead it." Her phone buzzed again. Olivia Chambers' voice came through urgent. "Celeste, the board is watching the live stream. They want to know your next step." Celeste looked out across the sea of faces. Some were hopeful, some were fearful, all were riveted. "Tell them," she said, "my next step has already begun. We're rebuilding trust, one decision at a time." She hung up, then faced the customers who had witnessed everything. "To those of you who stood silent, I ask you to reflect. Silence is easy, but silence is costly. To those of you who spoke up, who filmed, who bore witness, you're the reason accountability is possible. Never forget the power you carry." Tyler's hands trembled as he kept filming. His voice cracked. This is bigger than I ever imagined." Celeste walked slowly to the center of the lobby. "This is not just about me," she said, her voice soft yet carrying to every corner. "It is about every person who has ever been doubted, dismissed, or disrespected because of what they look like. Today, here, we take one step toward something better." For a long moment, the lobby was silent again. Not heavy this time, but charged with something new. Hope. The echoes of applause faded, replaced by a hum of hushed voices. Customers still stood with their phones raised, unwilling to look away. Employees shifted uneasily, their futures uncertain. Celeste Morgan stood at the heart of it all, her posture calm, her voice steady. "This moment does not end with discipline," she said. "If all we did was fire and suspend, then we would have only cut the weeds while leaving the roots untouched. The deeper work begins now, and it begins here." Her words sank deep. Even Marcus Reed, still pale from the sting of suspension, lifted his head to listen. Celeste turned to Kevin Shaw. "Kevin, you will remain as interim lead for this branch, but you will not do it alone. Every customer here today, every witness who chooses, will have the opportunity to contribute feedback directly to my office. You will create an open log, accessible, transparent, where people can record their experiences. No one's voice will vanish into silence again. Kevin nodded, a mixture of relief and fear flashing across his face. Yes, ma'am. I'll make sure it's done. Celeste faced the customers. If you're willing, you will be part of the rebuilding. This will not be a story about harm alone. It will be a story of renewal. Mrs. Whitaker raised her hand, her cane trembling. I'll write my name on that log first, she declared, because I've been waiting for someone to ask for our voices. The lobby broke into scattered applause again. People shifted forward, some already eager to sign, to be part of something bigger. Celeste's voice softened, becoming almost conversational. When I was a girl, my mother told me, never confuse quiet with powerless. Today, you proved her right. You filmed, you spoke, you refused to let the truth be buried, and because of that, this bank will change. Her phone vibrated once more. This time, instead of silencing it, she tapped the screen and placed it on speaker. Olivia Chambers's voice filled the air. Celeste, the board has voted to support you fully. They are releasing a statement now. Every branch is under audit. Every manager will undergo retraining. You have their authority to act immediately. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the employees who stood shamed and silent could not ignore the magnitude. This was no longer just one branch. This was system-wide. Thank you. Olivia, Celeste said calmly, make sure the statement names the truth plainly. Not an incident, not a misunderstanding. Call it what it is, bias, and tell them it will not be tolerated. Yes, ma'am, Olivia replied. Celeste ended the call, then looked back at the sea of faces. Words from the board matter, but what matters more is what we do here, in front of each other, when no press release can hide us. Tyler Brooks, still live streaming, whispered into his phone, she's not just punishing them, she's building a movement. Celeste gestured toward Damon Wright, the security guard who had handled every tense moment with quiet dignity. Damon, you will lead the safety and dignity training for this branch. What you showed today, firmness without aggression, protection without prejudice, that is what we need more of. Damon's eyes widened. Then he gave a slow nod. I'll do it, Ms. Morgan, gladly. The customers clapped again. Some even whistled. Celeste's gaze swept back to the counter, where the employees still lingered. She addressed them not with anger, but with something sterner expectation. Those who remain will go through a new program, beginning tomorrow. It will not be optional. 40 hours of in-person training, not online modules to click through, and it will not be abstract. You will face real stories, real voices, real consequences. The days of pretending not to see are over. Elaine Porter shifted uncomfortably, but she nodded, her earlier defiance broken by something heavier the truth. Celeste allowed a moment of silence. Then she spoke again, her voice gentler. Some of you are afraid right now, afraid of losing jobs, afraid of being judged forever by this one moment. Understand, this accountability is not the same as condemnation. But accountability must come first. Only then can redemption mean anything. The lobby grew still. The weight of her words held everyone. A young man near the back raised his voice. Ms. Morgan, what about the other branches? What if this isn't the only place it happens? Celeste met his eyes. It isn't the only place. I know that, which is why this audit will not stop at Midtown. By the end of the year, every branch of Havencrest will be reviewed. Not with secrecy, with transparency. We will publish the results publicly. We will own our failures, and we will show our progress, because dignity demands more than private promises." A murmur of approval swept through the crowd. Phones kept recording, capturing every word. Celeste took a breath. Her voice softer now, intimate despite the size of the room. "You may think this is only a story about banking. It is not. It is about every office, every store, every place where assumptions decide who belongs. If we change here, maybe others will too." For a moment, her gaze drifted inward, her thoughts brushing against memories of her own childhood, of being told you don't belong here in grocery aisles, in classrooms, even in playgrounds. She blinked, steadying herself. "I promised myself I would build a place where no one hears those words. Today, I renew that promise." The crowd fell silent again, but this time it wasn't tension that held them. It was reverence. Tyler's voice cracked with emotion as he spoke into his phone. She's not just talking about this bank. She's talking about all of us." Celeste looked around the lobby one final time, then said, "The world outside will call this viral. They will call it scandal. But I call it an opportunity. If you're willing, stand with me. Not just as witnesses, but as partners in rebuilding, because this place, our place, must be worthy of the people it serves." One by one, people stepped forward toward the makeshift log Kevin had set on the counter. Mrs. Whitaker was first, her handwriting shaky but proud. Then others followed, scribbling their names, leaving words of support, demands for justice, stories of their own. Celeste watched them, her heart heavy yet hopeful. She knew the path ahead would be long. But for the first time that day, she felt something shift inside her. The sting of the slap no longer lingered. What replaced it was stronger, the sense that this moment could outlive her, ripple outward, and rewrite more than one lobby's story. The doors of the Midtown branch opened with a groan, spilling late afternoon light into the marble lobby. Celeste Morgan walked out slowly, the satchel across her shoulder, her head high. The crowd outside had grown larger than she expected. Dozens of people lined the sidewalk, some craning their necks, others holding phones in the air to capture every second. A few held handmade signs scrawled hastily with marker "Dignity Now." "We see you, Celeste, banking, while black ends here." As she stepped onto the sidewalk, a rush of voices erupted. Reporters surged forward, microphones raised, their words tumbling over each other. "Ms. Morgan, what will happen to the employees? Do you believe this is systemic? How do you respond to the live stream going viral?" The flash of cameras painted her in bursts of white light. For a brief moment, the noise pressed in on her, heavy and chaotic. She could have walked past. She could have retreated to the safety of her car waiting at the curb, but she stopped. She turned to face them. Her voice was steady, though not loud. It didn't need to be. The crowd leaned in, quieting as if instinctively. Today, you saw what many have felt for years: dismissal, disrespect, bias. You saw it happen to me. But the truth is, it happens every day to people with less power, less platform, and fewer witnesses. The reporters scribbled furiously. Phones streamed live across platforms. Celeste continued, her words deliberate. "This is not only a Havencrest problem. This is not only a banking problem. This is a human problem. And today we begin to confront it with transparency, with accountability, and with change." The crowd broke into cheers. Celeste allowed the noise to settle before she spoke again. You ask what will happen to the employees. Accountability has already begun. Some have been dismissed, others face retraining. But understand this, it is not about punishment alone. It is about transformation. We will not just cut people out. We will rebuild the culture that allowed this to happen. One reporter shouted, "Do you believe this is systemic across the entire industry?" Celeste met the reporter's eyes. "I don't believe." "I know, because my inbox has been filled for years with stories from customers across this country, stories just like mine. Today, the difference is that you saw it live. Now you cannot look away." The crowd murmured agreement. Signs lifted higher. A chant began faintly at the back. Dignity first, and spread until dozens were shouting it in rhythm. Celeste's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and frowned. It was her assistant, warning her that national networks were already broadcasting the live stream footage. She slid the phone away. Let them watch, she thought. Let them all watch. A woman near the front of the crowd, holding a toddler on her hip, called out, "Ms. Morgan, my brother lost his account last year because they said his ID didn't look right. He's never trusted banks since. Will people like him have a place now?" Celeste's gaze softened. "Tell your brother this. Haven Crest will not be a place that questions someone's humanity before their paperwork. He is welcome. He deserves dignity. And starting today, he will find it." The woman clutched her child tighter, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she whispered. The chant grew louder, the energy building. Tyler Brooks, still filming, captured every word, his live stream now cresting at nearly 2 million viewers. He could hardly keep up with the flood of comments. "This is the moment. She's speaking for all of us. Finally, leadership with backbone." Celeste raised a hand, quieting the crowd again. "I will not pretend this is easy. Change never is. But I promise you this Haven Crest will face its truth in the open. No secrecy, no excuses, and I believe that others will follow, because this is bigger than me. It's bigger than this bank. It's about who we are willing to be for each other." For a long moment, the sidewalk fell silent, her words hanging in the cool air like something sacred. Then the applause came again, rolling like thunder. Her driver opened the door to her car, but Celeste paused, looking back at the branch behind her. Through the glass doors, she could still see the shaken employees, the customers scribbling their names in the open log Kevin had set up. Change had already begun inside. Now it stretched outward, into the city, into the country, carried on live streams and news feeds and the raw power of witness. As she slid into the car, she whispered to herself, almost a prayer, "Don't let this be a moment. Let it be a movement." The car pulled away, but the chants followed her down the block, echoing against the tall buildings of Atlanta. Dignity first. Dignity first. By the time she reached headquarters, the story had already reached the world. Screens in the lobby displayed breaking news banners. CEO Celeste Morgan confronts bias at own bank. Stock tickers scrolled in the corner, showing Haven Crest shares dipping slightly under the weight of scandal, but analysts' notes predicted resilience, even growth, if reform held true. Inside the executive suite, Olivia Chambers waited, eyes wide. Celeste. CNN is live outside. The White House press secretary just issued a statement. They're calling you tonight. Celeste exhaled. Steady. Then we keep telling the truth. Nothing less. She walked past Olivia, into the boardroom where screens displayed feeds from across the country, customers sharing their own stories, hashtags climbing into the millions, lawmakers demanding hearings. The movement she had whispered for was already taking shape, and Celeste knew, deep in her bones, that the hardest work was still ahead. The reckoning had begun, but redemption that would take more than one day. The boardroom screens still flickered with breaking headlines when the call from Washington came through. Celeste Morgan listened quietly as her assistant relayed the request. The House Committee on Financial Services had scheduled an emergency hearing. They wanted her to testify live, televised, before the entire country. Celeste closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. She had faced investors, hostile shareholders, and boardrooms filled with men who doubted her every move. But this was different. This was history calling, demanding not just leadership, but truth spoken in the open. By the following week, the marble steps of Capitol Hill were crowded with cameras. Protesters filled the streets with signs banking while black ends now. Accountability is currency. Dignity first. Reporters swarmed the entrance, their microphones ready. Celeste walked through them with measured grace, her navy suit crisp, her satchel across her shoulder as always. Inside the chamber, lawmakers shuffled papers, aides whispered urgently, and the room buzzed with anticipation. The chairwoman, Representative Linda Carver, banged her gavel. This hearing of the House Committee on Financial Services will come to order. Celeste took her seat at the witness table. Before her, a placard read simply Celeste Morgan, Chief Executive Officer, Havencrest Bank, Rep. Carver leaned forward. Ms. Morgan, the country has seen the footage. Millions watched as you were dismissed, disrespected, and even assaulted inside your own bank. We thank you for being here. Tell us, in your own words, what happened. Celeste adjusted the microphone. Her voice, when it came, was calm but carried to every corner. What happened in that branch was not unusual. That is why it matters. It was not the first time a customer was doubted because of their skin color. It was not the first time an assumption replaced respect. The only difference is that this time, the cameras were rolling, and the customer happened to be me. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Celeste continued. I did not go there for spectacle. I went as part of a blind audit program. I wanted to see the truth with my own eyes. And the truth is what you all saw bias, unchecked, in plain daylight. Rep. Thomas Greer, known for his sharp tone, cut in. Ms. Morgan, are you suggesting this is systemic across the entire industry? Not just your bank? Celeste met his eyes steadily. I am not suggesting, Congressman. I am stating, I have letters, emails, testimonies from customers across this nation. Their voices tell the same story. What happened to me is happening everywhere, only without the protection of a live stream. The chamber shifted, aides scribbling notes furiously. Rep. Carver leaned in. And what has Havencrest done since this incident? Celeste opened a folder and slid documents across the table. Effective immediately. We launched the Dignity First protocol. Every employee undergoes 40 hours of in-person bias training. Every branch creates an open customer log, accessible to executives. We have built an app, Equity First, that allows anonymous reporting directly to leadership, with a 48-hour response guarantee. And we are auditing every branch, not quietly, but with public reports. Transparency is not optional. It is mandatory. Some lawmakers nodded approvingly. Others exchanged skeptical glances. Rep. Greer pressed again. Ms. Morgan, some say this is a PR maneuver, that you are protecting your brand more than your customers. How do you respond? Celeste's voice did not waver. If this were PR, I would have hidden the footage. I would have silenced the witnesses. Instead, I stood in the lobby and named the truth out loud. That is not brand protection. That is accountability. The gallery erupted in applause until the gavel banged for order. Then Rep. Marisol Vega, a first-term congresswoman, leaned forward. Ms. Morgan, what do you believe Congress should do? Celeste inhaled deeply. She could feel the eyes of the nation through the cameras. I believe Congress should require what we are proving possible: mandatory reporting of bias incidents in financial institutions, independent audits of customer treatment, not just numbers on a balance sheet, protection for employees who speak out, and consequences, real consequences for institutions that fail to uphold dignity. The room stirred. Journalists typed furiously. Rep. Carver nodded slowly. Ms. Morgan, you have turned a personal assault into a national reckoning. That takes courage. Thank you. Celeste bowed her head slightly. It should not take courage to demand dignity. It should take only humanity. When she left the chamber hours later, the steps of Capitol Hill thundered with chants. Protesters raised their signs higher. Reporters shouted questions. But, above the noise, Celeste heard the same words repeated over and over by voices of every age and color. Dignity first. Dignity first. Back in her hotel that evening, Celeste finally let the quiet settle. She stood by the window, looking out over the Capitol dome glowing in the night. The day had been long, the questions sharp, the spotlight unrelenting, but beneath the fatigue was something steadier: resolve. Her phone buzzed, a message from Olivia Chambers. The White House wants to meet tomorrow. They're drafting a proposal. You've started something no one can ignore. Celeste set the phone down, closed her eyes, and whispered the words she had spoken to the crowd days before. Don't let this be a moment. Let it be a movement. The morning sun rose over Washington, casting a pale gold light across the city. Celeste Morgan sat in the back of a black sedan as it wound its way through streets lined with protest signs and news trucks. Crowds had not thinned since the hearing. If anything, they had grown, voices chanting, banners waving, the words "Dignity First" painted in bold strokes across cardboard and cloth. The car slowed at the gates of the White House. Security checked credentials, then waved them through. Celeste gazed out at the pristine lawn, the historic columns rising above, and felt the weight of centuries pressing into this single day. She inhaled, exhaled, and reminded herself of her mother's words: never confuse quiet with powerless. Inside, she was led through hushed hallways until double doors opened to the Roosevelt Room. The long table gleamed under chandeliers. Advisors shuffled papers, whispering urgently, and at the head of the table stood the President of the United States, waiting with an outstretched hand. Ms. Morgan, the President said warmly, thank you for coming on such short notice. Celeste shook the hand firmly. Thank you for inviting me. The urgency is clear. They sat. Around the table, cabinet members and economic advisors leaned in, eyes sharp with expectation. The President gestured. We've all seen the footage. We've watched the hearing. And frankly, the nation is demanding more than words. We need solutions. Real ones. Tell us what must change. Celeste folded her hands on the table, her satchel resting by her chair like a constant companion. Her voice was calm, deliberate. What must change is not just banking. It is accountability across every financial institution in this country. Too often, discrimination hides behind policy, behind procedures that look neutral but cut unevenly. We need transparency, we need enforcement, and above all, we need dignity as a standard, not an exception. An advisor spoke up. We're considering mandatory annual bias audits for banks above a certain size. Do you believe that would make a difference? Celeste met his eyes. Yes, but only if the results are public. Quiet audits die in filing cabinets. Public audits create pressure, and pressure creates change. Another advisor frowned. What about costs? Smaller banks may struggle with compliance. Celeste leaned forward. What is the cost of lost trust? What is the cost of customers walking away because they no longer believe the system sees them? The real cost is silence, and we've paid that for far too long. The president nodded slowly. What about employees? Some argue mandatory training is ineffective. Celeste's tone sharpened slightly. Training alone is ineffective if it's a checkbox, but training tied to accountability, measured, enforced, and connected to advancement changes behavior. At Havencrest, we've tied leadership bonuses to customer dignity metrics. When people's paychecks depend on respect, respect improves. The room stirred with murmurs. One advisor whispered, "That's radical." Celeste's eyes did not waver. "It's necessary." The president tapped a finger on the table. "If we introduced legislation, say, the Financial Equity and Dignity Act, what would you want included?" Celeste exhaled, choosing each word carefully. 3 pillars. 1. Transparency. Mandatory public reporting of bias incidents and resolution. 2. Accountability. Independent audits with enforcement power. 3. Protection. Whistleblower safeguards for employees who speak truth. Without those, it's words on paper. With them, it's a foundation. Silence followed, thick with gravity. Then the president leaned back, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "You realize what you're asking. Ms. Morgan will shake the industry to its core." Celeste nodded. "It needs shaking." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the president smiled faintly, almost wry. "I admire your clarity, and I agree. This is a moment we can't waste." An advisor scribbled notes rapidly. "We'll begin drafting language immediately." The meeting continued for another hour, filled with details, reporting structures, timelines, enforcement agencies. Celeste answered each question with precision, her voice calm but edged with urgency. By the end, the framework of a bill had begun to take shape. As she rose to leave, the president stopped her. "Ms. Morgan," he said quietly, "you remind me of leaders I read about in history books, the ones who didn't just witness injustice but forced change upon it. You may not have asked for this role, but you've taken it." Celeste inclined her head. "I didn't ask to be slapped in my own bank, but I choose what happens after, and what happens after must matter." The president extended a hand once more. "Then let's make it matter." Outside the White House. The sun was higher now, the chants louder, the cameras relentless. Celeste stepped into the light, her face calm, her posture unshaken. She knew the bill would face opposition. She knew lobbyists would fight, that shareholders across the industry would bristle. But she also knew the tide had shifted. The people had seen too much to turn away. As her car pulled away, Celeste allowed herself a rare smile. For the first time since that slap in the lobby of Midtown Branch, she felt something stronger than resolve. She felt possibility. Night had fallen over New York when Celeste Morgan finally returned to her apartment. The city hummed outside, restless as always, but in her living room the air was still, filled with nothing but the faint ticking of a wall clock and the distant wail of a siren. She set her satchel on the coffee table and sank into the couch, exhaustion pressing down like an invisible weight. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to sit in silence. The day had been relentless. The White House meeting, the press conferences, the never-ending phone calls from supporters and critics alike. Yet what lingered in her chest was not fatigue, but something else, an awareness that her life, and perhaps the lives of countless others, would never be the same. She reached for the remote and turned on the television. Every major channel carried the same headline: Financial Equity and Dignity Act drafted a new era for banking analysts, debated whether the bill could survive the gauntlet of Congress. Protesters outside the Capitol filled the screens, chanting, waving signs, demanding passage. And then, unexpectedly, a clip appeared: Tyler Brooks, the young live streamer whose video had captured the slap. His face filled the screen as he spoke to reporters. "I never thought press and record would matter this much," Tyler said, "but I guess that's the thing about truth. Sometimes it just needs a witness." Celeste Morgan didn't just stand up for herself, she stood up for all of us. And now it's our turn to stand up with her. Celeste felt her throat tighten. She muted the TV, staring at the silent image of Tyler's earnest face. He was right. This was no longer just her story. Her phone buzzed. A message from Damon Wright, the security guard who had stepped in during those first chaotic minutes at Midtown Branch. "Customers are coming back. People are thanking me in the lobby. For the first time in my career, I feel proud to wear this uniform." Another buzz. A message from Kevin Shaw, once a complicit manager now helping lead reforms. "Our first dignity audit showed progress. Still miles to go. But people see the difference. Thank you for not giving up on us." Celeste set the phone down, emotions welling. Quietly, she whispered into the stillness, "This is why." The following weeks blurred into a storm of hearings, debates, and interviews. Lobbyists tried to dilute the bill, claiming it would cripple banks. Headlines warned of financial upheaval. Yet, in town halls across the country, ordinary citizens stood up to speak. A grandmother in Detroit told a story of being denied a loan, despite perfect credit. A veteran in Dallas recounted being laughed at by a teller. A young mother in Atlanta described being treated as invisible. Their voices merged into a chorus that lawmakers could no longer ignore. When the bill finally reached the House floor, the nation held its breath. Celeste sat in the gallery, hands clasped, as roll call echoed through the chamber. Yes, yes, no, yes. The tally climbed, and when the final count was announced, passed. By a margin that stunned even optimists, cheers erupted inside and outside the Capitol. Tears blurred Celeste's vision as she rose to her feet. The tide had turned. The Senate fight was fiercer, but momentum was unstoppable. Weeks later, when the president signed the bill into law, Celeste stood beside the desk, pen in hand, cameras flashing. The Financial Equity and Dignity Act was no longer an idea. It was law. That night, back in New York, she returned to the Midtown Branch for the first time since that fateful day. The lobby had been remodeled, brighter lighting, open counters, welcoming signage, A plaque near the entrance bore words etched in bronze: "Justice is not what we say when it's easy. It's what we do when it's hard." Celeste Morgan. Customers moved through the space with a sense of ease. Employees greeted them warmly, and behind one counter stood Elaine Porter, the elderly woman who had once been humiliated in that same room. Now, she wore a badge reading "Customer Advocate." When she saw Celeste, her eyes filled with tears. "You did it," Elaine whispered. Celeste shook her head gently. "We did it." As she turned to leave, a young girl approached timidly, clutching her mother's hand. "Are you the lady from the video?" the girl asked. Celeste knelt to meet her eyes. "Yes, I am." The girl smiled shyly. "I want to be like you when I grow up." Celeste felt a lump rise in her throat. She brushed the girl's hair gently and replied, "Then promise me one thing. Never let anyone tell you where you don't belong." Later that night, alone again in her apartment, Celeste stood by the window, gazing at the skyline. She thought of her mother, who had taught her dignity in the face of scorn. She thought of the countless voices who had carried her fight forward. She thought of the slap, the sting that had started it all, and how something so small, so cruel, had become the spark for something immeasurable. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, strong, steady, unbowed. She whispered, almost to herself, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning." And as the city lights flickered like stars against the dark, Celeste Morgan allowed herself, at last, to believe not just in justice, but in hope, at its heart. This story reminds us that dignity is not a privilege, it is a birthright. What happened to Celeste Morgan in that bank lobby was not just an insult to her title, it was an insult to her humanity. Yet her response shows us something vital. True power is not measured by shouting louder, but by standing steady when others try to shake you. For those of us in everyday life, the lesson is simple but profound. There will be moments when we are judged unfairly, when people look at us and decide we are less than. In those moments, we have a choice. We can internalize the insult, or we can quietly but firmly remind the world who we are. And for those who witness injustice, the lesson is just as clear: silence is complicity. If we remain quiet while others are degraded, we allow the system to continue. Speaking up, whether it's in a bank, a workplace, or a neighborhood, is not only an act of courage but an act of healing for society itself. Celeste's story is more than inspiration. It is a call to live with dignity, to lead with compassion, and to demand fairness not just for ourselves, but for everyone. Thank you so much for watching and for sharing this journey with us. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so together we can keep telling stories that matter, stories that heal, and stories that remind us of the power of dignity